It can be a strange world out there, and every delicious mystery might just have a nugget of truth. This is Cryptid Nuggets.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cryptid Nuggets, a Beastie Boys Paranormal Adventures podcast.
Hello.
I am Jon Stenning. Oh, hi, Mitch. Hi. You're saying hi to me?
I'm saying hi. Well, yes, to you and to our viewers. I didn't mean to interrupt. It was more to be like in the background. Hello, like while you were still going.
No, it was nice. I'm Jon Stenning. That's Mitch DeAngelis. Hi, Mitch. We just said that. We just said hi. Right. I'm good. How are you? I should have turned notifications off.
Oh, yeah,
So,
where are my manners? Let me make sure my phone that's always on silent is on silent.
I should have done that. Very unprofessional of me, but now Do Not Disturb is on, and welcome to another episode of Cryptid Nuggets. Mitch, any news? I haven't really seen any paranormal news or anything like that lately. You see anything?
No major news that I have to present today, but I'm just gonna say a little anecdote here, which is, we're recording this shortly after Thanksgiving, and originally I thought, it'd be fun for like a Thanksgiving sort of episode further down the line or something, maybe next year. Are there any like turkey cryptids? But
turkey-based cryptids, okay?
Turkey, like the animal. So I Googled it, and of course, you can imagine it's a very difficult thing to Google because all that comes up is cryptids from Turkey. But I couldn't find any. Be fun. So if anybody has ever heard of like a if there is a turkey squatch out there, because there's bat squatch and sheep squatch. If there's a turkey squatch, I would love to know about it so we can talk about it, because I think that'd be really fun.
Turkey man, or maybe like a turkey that's haunting a farm because you killed so many of its ancestors. Yeah, ghost turkey.
That could be kind of
turkey's spooky. Famously dumb animal, a turkey. So I feel like there's the old anecdote that a turkey, if it looks up, it will just open its mouth and could drown itself. That's how dumb turkeys are.
I've never heard that, actually.
Yeah, because they'll just look up and open their mouth and drown, essentially. That was something I heard as a young lad.
Yeah.
And so, if you're not familiar with the show, we tell a little. Mitch, you're going to tell me a story about some crackpot cryptid or paranormal thing, and then we're going to pair it up with a snack in just a little bit. So what do you have in store for me today?
So a little peek behind the curtain for our listeners and our viewers is a lot of times we try to find the snack first, because that sort of dictates the topic, because the snacks can be kind of hard to get or we have to import them or whatever. So without spoiling what we're going to be eating later, our topic today was kind of Louisiana, New Orleans type stuff. And I was doing my research, and there was a lot to sort of look into, because there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about. There's lots of ghost stories, there's Bigfoot, there's swamp monsters, there's all these different things. But something kind of popped into my head while I was thinking New Orleans, and I've always sort of associated New Orleans with one thing. And hear me out on this. Vampires.
Okay. Wow. All right. That's very Interview with a Vampire of you.
Yes.
That's very Tom Cruise. Very Tom Cruise of you, who, I think is truly one of the greatest action stars of all time. And no problem there. I don't think a lot of people would say that about vampires.
Well, you'd be surprised, because I thought the same thing. I was like, all right, I looked into it just a little bit, because I was like, it's probably just only Interview with a Vampire, kind of like,
oh no, there's more.
Set
there's
that
a
reputation.
Lot.
But
right.
I went down sort of a rabbit hole on this.
It's almost a vacation home from the Eastern European castles of vampires past. But, vampires were colonizers too. And where did they decide to colonize? Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting though is that I'm apparently not alone with this of associating vampires with New Orleans, because there's.
Is it really the first thing you think about? Not like skunk, not like a different.
Well,
version of skunk
when I think paranormal, right? In all honesty, I don't think like Bigfoot. I don't think swamp monsters. I think vampires in New Orleans, right?
Okay, guys, I'm cool with
and
that. Yeah.
It turns out that New Orleans actually has a very prominent vampire subculture.
I'm sure. Have you ever been? Have you ever been to the city of New Orleans?
I've never been. Have you been?
I have. It's very interesting. Like the historical portions are very, very European. Like everyone is familiar with like the Frenchness of it. Right?
Yeah.
But it's a much more than like just French. It truly is an amalgam of
all sorts of different cultures.
Yeah, and tons of like I mentioned colonizers, and even when we talk about the snack later, like the flavor palette is like from all over the place, not even just Europe. You're talking Africa as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry. I think I'm sure I got ahead of us there.
No,
bit.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
What do you have a tale about a specific vampire?
I have quite the tale.
Oh, okay.
But when you Google New Orleans vampires, the first thing that comes up is like this vampire subculture that's there. And it's kind of like a mix of goth and punk counterculture that is all focused around like vampires. Like these people like consider themselves vampires. They wear things like acrylic fangs. They say they feed off of people's like psychic energies and emotions.
It seems very sexual too.
Yes.
It seems very sexual.
Well, yeah, for some of them, it's like a form of sexual expression, right?
Yeah.
And like some of them even drink blood, right? From like willing people,
Yeah.
And I'm sure for some of them, it's like a network way to make friends who are like-minded and all that sort of stuff too, right? There's nothing really wrong
freaks,
with it. They're not really
the
doing
freaks
any
come
harm.
out at night. Yeah, exactly. They're all the freaks are getting together, and it's okay being a little freaky, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Like you said, the blood is drinking. The people who donate their blood, they're doing just that. They're donating it. You're not stealing it from them.
Yes, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But these vampires in New Orleans, they have all these like little hot spots all over the city. They have like little potion shops that sort of like integrate their vampire subculture with like the local voodoo religious traditions.
Yeah.
And they have like these secret bars that are like speakeasies that are in like social clubs that are hidden in like other places where there's like a doorman and you have to know like the password in order to enter. So
maybe like a Spike Easy or something like that. If we're talking
sort
about
of.
Buffy characters. What like that seems like a lot of fun. New Orleans is a big city too, right? I mean,
it's a pretty sizable city. Right?
Yeah, it's a pretty big city.
It's probably one of the largest down in the South for sure. I don't know if it's like largest total. I
think it's probably top 10 in the U.S. We've obviously done our research here, but I'm sure it's like population wise top 10 in the U.S. I would think it's big. It's a big city.
Definitely like top 10 in the South, right? And it's like a tourist attraction too, because there's all sorts of not even paranormal stuff. There's like. The music scene is big there, and the architecture, and people go there for all sorts of reasons. So it's a pretty
some of the best food I've ever had in my life. Truly,
I believe
great
it.
food.
I 100% believe it. Right. So after finding out about this, I was like, all right. So like, obviously, there's some vampire culture there, but are there any vampire stories from New Orleans? And it turns out that New Orleans has had vampire stories since it was like first founded.
Yeah, sure.
So, New Orleans founded in 1718, right? It's only like 305 years old. So it's a pretty relatively new city in the grand scheme of things. But so when New Orleans was first founded, it was founded by France, and a lot of the people they sent over were sort of like France's undesirables. So like prisoners and convicts, con men, pirates, basically anybody that was a problem in the old country. They sent to New Orleans to their colony. So the colony turns into sort of a large and prosperous town, but there's a problem in that there isn't a lot of women there because, they're sending all men. So the French government comes up with this idea to rectify this problem. So the first thing they do is they send over some Catholic nuns to establish a convent there.
Perfect.
And this convent is still there to this day. This is the famous Ursuline convent that's in New Orleans today, and they built it in 1726. And the whole idea with this convent was the French government was going to send over a bunch of, bachelorettes from France to New Orleans to settle down and start families with, all these men that were there. So they pluck these girls. They take them from, a lot of them taken from orphanages, from convents. I'm sure there were plenty who were sort of forced to go to New Orleans against their will, right? And they get sent by the French to New Orleans. And they travel with these large wooden trunks that are called casquettes. And they become known as
I'm sick of the French already.
Girls.
Okay.
So
yeah, but this seems like it seems like a terrible way of being like shipped out.
Exactly. So they send these girls. France had already sent some of these girls to Canada previously, but something was strange about these girls that come to New Orleans. So they arrive off the boat after their 3-month journey overseas, and they look sick. They look pale. They look famished. They stay at this Ursuline convent until they're able to find more permanent homes. And almost as soon as these girls arrive, the body count in New Orleans skyrockets. People are dying of plague. Bodies are being found, mysteriously murdered. Vicious killings are happening. And a lot of people are like, these girls brought something with them. So it was believed that these casket girls, either intentionally or accidentally, brought with them from Europe the first vampires to New Orleans.
Wow.
And as the story goes...
But they weren't vampire. Are they vampires, or they're bringing vampires with them?
They brought the vampires with them. Either they were in the caskets themselves, or... Because these things are about the size of a person, right? These large wooden trunks. They're pretty big. Or perhaps the girls were, haunted by these vampires that sort of traveled along with them, right? Because sometimes vampires are more of like a ghost-like thing than like an actual flesh and blood creature, right?
No, that sucks.
But,
that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks. I hate that. No, vampires should be a fucking Dracula. They're all Draculas. They're all just like brooding. A ghost? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Well, so, I think you're gonna.
I like how you're also like.
Takes, though.
I like how you're like. Well, either it was they were haunted, or they just brought fucking tuberculosis with them on the boat.
I mean, it's very possible, right? Because tuberculosis, for those that don't know, has a lot of side effects. One of which is turning you pale, making you sickly, coughing up blood, right? Yeah. Which, in fact, they used to associate in some places tuberculosis with vampirism. So
right here in the state of Rhode Island, where we're recording this episode from.
Yeah, exactly.
There's tons of that.
Exactly, right? With the famous Mercy Brown case, which we'll have to talk about sometime down the line. But anyway, so as the story goes with this is only the tip of the iceberg, right? The nuns of this convent that these girls were staying at, they figure out that these girls have brought vampires with them. So while the sun is up, they take all these wooden caskets, shove them into the attic of the convent, and then using silver nails, 600 of them that have been blessed by the Pope himself.
What?
They lock the wooden trunks in the attic, and they board up the doors, and they shutter the windows. Which is
this is real. This is real.
Like the attic of the Ursuline convent still have shutters on them to this day, right? And now supposedly in 1987, when Pope John Paul II visited America, he went to New Orleans and visited the Ursuline convent, and supposedly he re-blessed those nails. Wow. So this is a pretty well-known story as part of like local New Orleans lore. But I will be honest, it's also extremely hard to verify if this happened the way people say it did, because, we're talking things that are so old that there's like not a lot of written records, any of this. It's hard to find old newspapers about something like this.
Right, but we do know for sure that blessings by Roman Catholic popes do wear off after 200 years, so the timeline makes sense.
Well, it is an interesting coincidence, but so I heard this story, right? And I was like, all right, this is neat. It's a little weird. That's got to be it, right? But then this is where I really went down this rabbit hole that I think is going to challenge a lot about what we think about the notion of what is a vampire, what is a cryptid, and what is actually possible, right?
How often do you quote unquote go down the rabbit hole online?
Depends on
Once a day?
Depends on the subject. With paranormal
Once or twice
stuff,
a day,
quite
easy?
often. Yeah, it's probably at least multiple times a week. This one was one that I went down this and it struck me, and I was like, we gotta talk about this.
Okay.
This is when I found out about New Orleans' most famous vampire. His name is Jacques Saint Germain. So the year is 1900. And New Orleans is now part of the United States of America, right? It's one of the biggest cities in the South. And, as we said before, it's a big melting pot of all these cultures, all these traditions, all these flavors, all these musics, right? There's a big French population. And living in a house on Royal Street, actually it was 1039 Royal Street, which still stands today in the French Quarter of Louisiana, there lived a man whose name was Jacques Saint Germain. So Jacques Saint Germain was an interesting fellow. He looked to be probably like 40 to 45 years old, and he was originally from France. And he seemed to have more money than God, but no one ever knew how he made any of it, right? He was well-groomed, and he dressed in the finest clothes. He loved the color black, and his two-story home on Royal Street was richly decorated. There was a lot of stuff there, And Jacques, he rarely integrated himself with the local upper class in the city, especially people like politicians, police, doctors, lawyers, yada, yada.
Sounds like a vampire to me, this guy.
Yeah. He would throw these hugely expensive, catered, lavish parties where he would entertain all these prominent guys, to gain influence and all that sort of stuff. And he would also hire ladies of the night to come and entertain them. So,
have you seen Interview with a Vampire?
I have, actually. In fact, I watched it just recently to prepare for this.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just a little tangent there. Tom Cruise makes that movie. He is the best performance
and famously, like Anne Rice, is that her name? The author, like she was very upset that Tom Cruise was cast in the movie. Like like upon hearing the casting, she was like, "No way, Lestat should not be this puny little guy." And he absolutely crushed it, and she on record is like, I was wrong, it's a great casting. And
I read that she personally phone called him after seeing the movie and apologized to him.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think is like so awesome, because that is a really cool movie. But it sounds like she is a great author, and she probably did her research,
Oh yeah, I have a feeling that this was an influence on her writing, because this is actually a well-known story in New Orleans. Yeah. Right? So the entire time this Jacques Saint Germain guy, he's hosting these big lavish parties, there's all these delicious meals, right? But he would never actually eat anything. He would just watch people and sort of observe. He had his own personal chalice of wine that he would sip from.
Hold on. Wine.
Whoa, just wait.
It's blood.
So
it's blood.
Jacques was a true Renaissance man, right? He could speak French, English, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, German, Latin, ancient Greek. He spoke all of them fluently and barely had an accent, right? He could also hold conversations in Arabic, Chinese, Creole, and a dozen of other languages.
Wow.
He had vast knowledge about every subject: literature, science, chemistry, physics. He could play almost any instrument with ease, like he'd been playing it all his life, and he would tell stories about his travels all over the world. And when you talked about history, he would talk about historical events that, sometimes hundreds of years ago that happened, and he would talk about them with like such familiarity. It was like he was there when it happened. Right?
Yeah.
And he claimed he owed it all to his ancestor, whose portrait proudly hung on his wall behind him, the Count of Saint Germain.
The Count?
The Count of Saint Germain.
It's just him. It's just him.
So Jacques even bore quite the resemblance to the man in the portrait, and even was close in age. So from 1900 to 1904, Jacques was the talk of the town amongst the elite there. And then on one fateful night, it all changes. So it's the middle of the night when the residences on Royal Street are woken up to the hysterical screaming of a woman lying on the street below the balcony of Jacques Saint Germain's house. Her leg is broken because she flung herself from the upper balcony. So she's crying, she's hysterical, she's absolutely traumatized, and all she can scream is that he's gonna kill me over and over again. So the police show up, and the woman is calmed down enough that she can tell her story. And she's a prostitute. She's hired by Jacques for one of his parties, which had just ended earlier that night. And after the party, he took her upstairs to his bedroom, and things got very strange very quick. Jacques...
Hey, don't kink shame. Don't kink shame, Mitch.
Well, I think... I'm not a kink shamer, but I think this goes a little too far. So Jacques locks the door, and he corners her, threatening her, and then he lunges at her, trying to bite her neck. So she fought him off with all her might, and seeing no escape, she broke a window onto the balcony, then flung herself off the balcony. So that broken window on Royal Street, that window is still bricked over to this day.
Wow.
So the police, when they arrive, right, they are no doubt either frequent guests of Jacques, because Jacques loved to entertain the local police, probably just for this exact reason.
Yeah, they're really bad. They're just like terrible detectives. They should have noticed that there was never any garlic in any of the dishes at the dinner parties. They just like failed to pick up. You know what? There was never any garlic at his house.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And this silverware, it's not silver.
It's not quite silver. All the silverware it happens to be made of gold, which is also very expensive.
Yeah. Does this wine taste funny to you?
Yeah. Tastes like metal.
So the police
so the cops come.
Yeah, the cops come. They give him some preferential treatment, right?
Yeah.
And Jacques, not wanting to be questioned in the middle of the night, right? He agrees, I'll come to the police station the following morning, and we'll talk about this. So
in the morning?
The police agree. And now, of course, when morning came, Jacques no-showed. So after an entire day with no Jacques Saint Germain, the police finally search his house to see that he was gone. He left in a total hurry.
He fled.
All his furniture is still there, including the portrait of the Count of Saint Germain that he was so fond of. Interestingly, there wasn't a single piece of cutlery or silverware in the entire house. All of it came in and went out with the caterers. What they did find, however, was in the basement, there's a stash of wine, which they determined to be wine that was mixed with human blood.
What the?
Now, it might be easy to sort of dismiss this as some made-up farce, right? But there's a few things that I think make it even more interesting. So, first off, Jacques Saint Germain was a real guy. He appears on a passenger logbook of a ship that brought him from France to New Orleans in 1890. And he's on the census record listed as working as an engineer. So, furthermore, there's supposedly from some things that, sources that I got that said that there are newspaper articles from this time, including an article in the New York Times from the 1900s that talk about this entire event. Now, I don't subscribe to the New York Times.
This was a national news story from 1904?
From 1904, apparently, according to one source I have, that he said, and I quote...
Wait, and you could have gotten it from the New York Times, but you don't subscribe, so you didn't?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
But also, this was
archive.
In several different newspapers locally in New Orleans that are apparently available at public libraries and stuff like that. Also, I think more interesting is this Count of Saint Germain guy is a very real guy, and he's equally, or perhaps even more, as mysterious as Jacques Saint Germain. And this is where I really started to go down this rabbit hole, right? Because we know a lot about this guy, but we also know very little about him. And what we know about this guy is important because he lived alongside a lot of famous people from his time period who wrote a lot of things about him. So,
what?
From 1740...
This is his dad?
This could...
quote unquote dad, or he just said his ancestor?
Yeah, his ancestor, right? So we're talking about a guy who lived in the 1700s who looked just like this guy.
Let's just say for all vampires purposes, it's him.
It very well could be. So
right. I mean,
from
hopefully
1740 to 1780, there's this infamous Count Saint Germain, or the Count of Saint Germain, who is this prominent figure in European high society. So amongst his friends of the time period who knew him and personally wrote things about him were people like King Louis XV of France, King Louis XVI of France, who's the one who gets beheaded during the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette.
Wow.
Another friend of him was the famous French philosopher and scientist Voltaire. And he was also a good friend of the famous Italian womanizer and adventurer Casanova. And all of them wrote things about this guy. And the interesting thing is, despite knowing his title and knowing that he was real, we don't even know this guy's actual name, right? Yeah. Likely because he never gave it to anyone. So the first thing we even have written about this guy comes from, he's in England, and it's about 1740, and he's captured under suspicion of being a spy. Because here's this strange French guy who speaks all these different languages. He has all this money. They don't know how he got it. So they interrogate him. You know, there's probably some threats of torture, and he absolutely refuses to even tell them who he is. All he keeps saying is he's the Count of Saint Germain. And they make special note of how he spoke every language in the known world, how he's a talented musician who wrote multiple violin pieces that we actually have and you can listen to. Wow. He wore very fine black clothes. He was decked out with bling, all sorts of jewels. He was especially fond of diamonds. And
sharp teeth. He had really sharp teeth.
Yeah, and he styled himself as something sort of an alchemist. So the pursuit of alchemy, for those who don't know, it's the predecessor kind of to modern chemistry, where it was really when we first started to experiment with like elements and base metals and how to combine things to make new substances and stuff. But the main goals of alchemy have always been to find ways to transmute metals like lead and iron into gold, and also to pursue the means of immortality. So supposedly, according to several people, Saint Germain was a very talented alchemist. He was able to turn lead into gold, something which was witnessed by Casanova himself. Okay. Although Casanova also thought it might have just been a very, very good sleight of hand trick, he wasn't sure. So the Count claimed he learned these secrets traveling all over Arabia and Asia, and he studied with the Shah of Persia to learn how to fuse diamonds together. And he once even took a diamond that was flawed, that was given to him by the King of France, valued at 6,000 francs. I don't know what that is adjusted for inflation today. But he turned it over the course of 1 month, using his carefully guarded trade secret, into a flawless diamond that was valued at 10,000 francs. So he actually fixed the diamond and even made it slightly bigger. So Casanova also recorded something very unusual at the Count, which is going to sound very familiar. He never seemed to eat anything. At a party they were both at, he makes specific mention that he didn't eat a single thing at the table, and all he did was talk all night. He said he regaled them with stories of history and his travels around the world. And Casanova almost sounds like he was a little jealous, because he goes so far as to say, as a conversationalist, he is unequaled. Now,
all that experience.
Yeah. Now, the Count claimed to be in possession of the legendary Philosopher's Stone. So, if you know the Harry Potter series, right, in the U.S., the first book is called the Sorcerer's Stone, but in Europe, it's called the Philosopher's Stone. And the Philosopher's Stone is this special type of object in, like, the realm of alchemy that's supposed to be able to transmute metals and give immortal life. Now, Voltaire, who's this famous cynical. He's kind of a satirical philosopher. He's a scientist. He knew the Count personally, and he once remarked that the Count claimed he was over 500 years old, and he wrote, "The Count of Saint Germain knows everything and never dies." Now, was Voltaire simply taking the piss and making fun of him, being like, yeah, right? Or is there something more to this that maybe Voltaire knew and was having a laugh about that we don't?
Yeah, but this is also just like a cast of like lunatics that hang out with each other.
Kind of,
all these people are lunatics, including the King of France and Marie Antoinette. You know what I mean? Like, they're all just like, and you say scientists, but like, what kind of like philosopher or scientist are you in like 1700? You know what I mean? Where you think you can like turn lead into gold. It's a very different.
Yeah, Voltaire's whole stick is sort of making fun of other people, right?
Yeah,
that was
for
his
sure.
form of philosophy. So
yeah, right. Like poking holes in everyone else's philosophy and like saying that you're a fool for living life the way that you live it. Yeah, right. I mean,
right. But here's the thing: is this Count guy. The Count of Saint Germain, he also never really seemed to age. So no matter who writes about him over this 40-year period that we have written,
he's always 45.
He always looks somewhere within the vicinity of 40 to 45.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a
perpetually
story,
middle age.
Yeah, there's a famous story where they're at this high society soiree, and he gets recognized by this 90-year-old countess from Italy who approaches him, and he asks. She asked him, did you have like a father or an uncle who had the same title in Venice 50 years ago? And then the Count calmly and confidently told her that it was in fact himself that she met all those years ago, and even recalled personal anecdotes about their meeting that apparently there was no other way he could know these things unless he was actually met her. And when she asked, how is that possible? All he did was he looked at her and he said, "Madam, I'm much older than I look." So the Count passes away in the 1780s. And when he dies, he apparently has very little left in his estate, right? He only leaves behind a chump change almost, right? But here's the thing is, he doesn't stay dead. So Marie Antoinette is getting executed in 1793 during the French Revolution. And one of her assistants or handmaidens who spared was also a friend of the Count of Saint Germain. And she wrote that not only did she see him at the execution, she personally spoke to him not once, not twice, but 3 different times that day after he supposedly died in 1780, right? 1784. So also, that same year that he dies, the next year, the Freemasons, the famous secret society, elect as their representative for Europe to be the Count of Saint Germain.
Wow, okay.
So now he's seen throughout the 1800s by so many different people. I could talk for hours about all of them, but one of the most notable is there's this woman in Russia. Her name is Helena Blavatsky, and she's this mystic that's in 1875 in Russia. She's, a fortune teller, a seer, and she founds this religion that's called Theosophy. And it's a religious movement that's based around the belief that there's these group of enlightened individuals who are known as ascended masters who guide humanity's progress. So Saint Germain is supposed to be one of these ascended masters. And it could just be like, yeah, right, she made this up. But no, there's even a photo of Helena Blavatsky where she's alongside a middle-aged man who dressed in very fine black clothes, who looks to be about probably 40 to 45, and he is explicitly labeled in the photo to be the Count of Saint Germain. In 1930, on Mount Shasta in California, a man named Guy Ballard is hiking the mountain, and he claims to come across none other than the Count of Saint Germain himself, who enlightens Ballard on many subjects. And Ballard goes on to create his own religious movement that's called the I Am activity. And this was a popular, like, social religious movement in, like, the 30s and 40s and 50s. So, before we we go any further, because there's even more, right? Let's talk a little bit about, could this be Jacques Saint Germain, right? Because
yeah, I mean, why not?
But also, the thing I want to address is it really possible for someone to live forever?
So to me, like if I'm really talking like trying to be open-minded, but also being like skeptical, like, yes, but this is just our interpretation of like aliens, right?
In a way,
because
yeah.
well, no, this is just like my way of like believing a story like this, right?
Yeah.
Because like, there are, you know, you can question whether or not you believe in like Bigfoot or vampires or something, but there's a pretty good chance that aliens exist. And I think that like aliens could be, or, you know, and I guess by the term aliens is like almost too broad that people close their minds to it very quickly.
Yeah.
But like, if I'm talking about intelligent life that is not from Earth,
Yes.
how would it manifest itself here on Earth? That could be what our interpretation as humans believe to be as ghosts, vampires,
Yep.
whatever it is, right? And so like I think if we are to believe that this entity is the same entity and has lived for 500 plus years and has sort of gone through their own process of reanimation every 100 years or so, and they you know, they could become dormant, and then they find themselves again, they move, they uphold their whole life. Like that to me is not a blood-sucking vampire from a movie.
Yeah.
Because that seems somewhat more far-fetched than our interpretation of a, you know, intelligent life form that happens to not be from Earth, you know, and like that's how it's manifesting itself. And our beliefs with media and like our perspectives have been like molded in a way that makes us be like, oh, it's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that would be how I choose to believe that this is the same person, essentially.
So I think that's interesting that you bring up the whole possible extraterrestrial / extra dimensional sort of being here, because that's sort of, there's a lot of theories that abound about this Count Saint Germain guy. And some people just assume that, you know, he died and all these other people who claimed to be him after were just imposters, right? But there's also, you know, that whole thing of religion of theosophy basically is akin to like, this is not a human. This is some other type of being that, you know, is using his powers or his gifts or his knowledge to try to guide humanity, right? Now, I have a few more interesting anecdotes about this guy, and then we're going to go back to New Orleans and talk possibly about how Jacques Saint Germain might still be around. So, first of all, now it's 1970. In France, there's a magician and an actor. His name is Richard Chanfray, and he claims publicly to actually be the Count of Saint Germain. And so people naturally at this point are like, well, prove it. And he does. He goes on live TV. He takes a piece of lead wire that's given to him by a TV crew. And on live TV, he turns that lead wire into gold on camera using a special powder that he claimed was what we call the Philosopher's Stone. And the interesting thing is, Chanfray didn't even touch the wire himself during the entire process. All he did was instruct somebody else what to do. And it was determined later by credible scientists that the lead wire was actually gold, and it had the exact same dimensions as the original lead wire. So, interesting to note is that you can't actually turn lead into gold. We found this out recently. All you need is a particle accelerator. So you're talking like heavy-duty science equipment. But it's possible to take a metal and to take an element and turn it into something else by changing its particles.
Yeah, it's also possible to lie on television.
It is. It is completely possible to lie on television, right? So this Chanfray guy, he actually passes away in 1983. But so did the Count of Saint Germain. He passed away.
Yeah, you got to reanimate yourself somehow. Now he's friggin' Nicolas Cage or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, right? Or Keanu Reeves, right? There's that portrait of like
Keanu,
that
right.
Civil War general who looks just like Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
So now, while learning about Jacques Saint Germain, there's apparently people who live in New Orleans to this day that have reported encounters with a very strange middle-aged man who dresses in these fine black clothes, and he calls himself Jack. Right now, Jack being
great, love that.
Now, Jack, of course, being the more anglicized version of Jacques. He's
getting a little lazy.
Yeah,
he's getting a little lazy with this whole like trying to create a whole new life. He's like, I'm just gonna skate by.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna eat some rats or whatever. I don't know, man.
Well,
the world kind of
the monarchy's dead, dude. The title count doesn't really carry that much prestige anymore.
No.
So they only see this guy at night, and he's always fraternizing with, young people. And his favorite thing to do is he asks people for a light for his cigarette. And he's known to sort of seemingly appear and vanish in the blink of an eye. He's most often seen on Royal Street near, now get this, the famous vampire-filled Ursuline convent is where he's most often sighted. So one story that I read about this comes from a prominent member of New Orleans vampire subculture. His name is Balthazar Ashen Tyson. Now, he tells...
Okay, hold on. This person that you just cited.
Yeah.
Let's go over their name and the title that you gave them. How did you introduce them?
So he's one of the most prominent members of New Orleans vampire subculture.
Okay, so one of them, right? You're saying that like it's an actual title, but it is not. It is something that like the internet has done.
Well, he appears in tons of documentaries, right?
Okay,
he's like a local celebrity there.
You mean, and by documentaries, you mean videos on YouTube?
No, like actual documentaries that they've done. That like the History Channel has done. That the CW has done, that Netflix has done, all about vampire legends and subculture in New Orleans, right?
Okay. I love the History Channel has gone off the deep end the past fucking 10 years.
They absolutely have, dude. As someone who loved the History Channel, as a history buff, it has almost nothing to do with history these days.
Ancient Aliens was way too popular. It was way too popular to ruin that channel. Yeah. Okay, so prominent figure, Balthazar.
His name is Balthazar Ashen
Balthazar.
Tyson. And
is that his birth name? His or her birth name?
I don't know if that's his birth name, to be honest. Okay. I assume it's not, because it just sounds too perfect for it. I'm a vampire. Yes. My name's Balthazar. It's like, okay.
Right. Okay, so this person... Oh, okay, so are you also claiming that this person themselves is also a vampire? I'm saying he's one vampire
of those people
expert
who wears acrylic fangs. He drinks people's blood, but they donate it to him.
Okay.
He runs like a
he wishes he was a vampire.
Voodoo shop.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, how does this place stay open? How does this place possibly make rent in this neighborhood? They don't sell anything. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's apparently a popular tourist thing. So
yeah. Okay. So please, yes.
So
what did Balthazar tell us? Balthazar. What did Balthazar say?
Balthazar in Mysteries
Listen, all due
Decoded.
respect too. Yeah. All due respect to Balthazar. If Balthazar wants to come on the podcast, please. We know you're astute and you've been in many documentaries on the History Channel, but please come on the podcast. I would love to talk to you.
Yeah,
about
I would love
everything.
to know. I would love to have a conversation with. Honestly, from his documentaries, he seems like a pretty well mannered, approachable, engaging individual. Right?
Blood drinking, engaging individual.
But in such a way, a vampire probably should be engaging and sociable and charismatic. Right?
That's right. Yeah, of course.
So Balthazar tells this story in an episode of the CW's Mysteries Decoded: Vampires of New Orleans. Listen, I want to cite my sources for this part because I feel like it's important to know where I'm getting it from at this point. right?
Oh, it's very important. It's definitely important, and so people should just understand what the sources that Mitch went to a show from the CW.
Well, because when I was looking for more stuff on this Jacques Saint Germain guy, I that was one of the first readily available things that came up. So naturally, I watched it, right? And then that led me down a whole.
Naturally,
that's how I found out that he appears on the census records, and I was like, "This show made that up." And then I found multiple other sources that also show that no, he is on the census record. He is on a passenger logbook. Jacques Saint Germain is a real guy.
Mitch does his research. The CW does their research. Belfazar does his research.
Yeah. So Belfazar it's a stormy night, right? Probably about 2004, I think he says it is. He's walking to his car in the French Quarter, and there's this mysterious man that approaches him. He's dressed to the nines in a black trench coat. He looks, middle-aged, right? He has maybe like a light French Cajun accent. That's about it. And he approaches him and he asks him for a cigarette, for his cigarette. So they exchange a few pleasantries. Belfazar gives him a light. And then as he's continuing on to his car, the man goes, "It's a nice night for Jack." And then Belfazar turns around and he's gone. He just vanishes, right? Now, on its own, it's like, all right, okay, whatever. And I kind of thought along the same lines as you, John, until while further researching Jacques Saint Germain, I stumbled upon the YouTube account that's called Legends, History, and Travel. That's run by a man named Bogdan Mihak. And Bogdan is a tour guide. He's a tour guide in New Orleans. He's a Transylvanian immigrant, right?
Wow.
He's a tour guide in New Orleans. And he has a few videos on this subject, where he has one where he tells the entire story of Jacques Saint Germain, and even shows you the house where it happened. But he does a second one where he tells a secondhand story that he acquired from a former politician in New Orleans, and who's now a barkeeper, who wants to remain anonymous. And this barkeeper, he's walking home one night, down the French Quarter to his house. He's passing the Ursuline convent, and who's there at the corner dressed all in black and asks for a light for a cigarette? This weird, strange, middle-aged guy. And they have this sort of unnerving and uncomfortable conversation with this guy. And he finds out, he says, "All right, buddy, that's enough for me. I'm going to head home now." So he's walking home, and he's making sure this guy's not following him. He's turning around every so often, making sure this weirdo is not following him home, right? And he gets to his house, and he turns around one final time to make sure he's not being followed, only to turn back around, and now this strange guy is literally at his doorstep, right? And he's blocking the door to his house. And he says he profusely thanks this guy for talking to him, right? He goes so far as to say, "No one's spoken to me for almost 80 years. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. It's been so long since I've talked to anybody." And then he ends it all with, "It's a nice night for Jack."
This is so funny, because to me, both times it sounds like a pervert saying it's a nice night to jack off.
In a way, I can definitely see that. But I thought it was just interesting to find two stories from two different sources of this guy who says the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I want to believe it's a vampire.
Yeah, same, right? But there's also, it's like, is it a vampire though? I don't know. Vampires aren't real, right? So, Jack finally steps aside, lets our protagonist into his home. Now, Bogdan also has another story on his same channel that of an interaction he had with someone that was quite odd when he first moved to New Orleans around 2010. So he'd been in the U.S. for only a few years already. He was living in D.C. He's a native of Transylvania originally. He moves to New Orleans around 2010. He says, by this time, I was still very new to the city. I didn't really know anybody. I was still getting used to it. I still didn't have permanent work. He's at a local restaurant, and this strange man who's dressed all in black, he approaches Bogdan, and he introduces himself as Giacomo, right? Which is the Italian form of Jacques or Jack.
Yeah.
So Giacomo claimed to Bogdan that he was a relative of Bogdan from Transylvania. He knew Bogdan personally by name. Bogdan had never seen this guy in his life, and that Giacomo said, "I'll be keeping an eye at you, and I'll be coming to get you." And Bogdan was like, "All right, this is weird. This is way too weird." This was before he had ever heard of Jacques Saint Germain or these stories about Jack, right? And Bogdan was like, "I don't think I have any relative named Giacomo that I know of." He sort of brushed it off, and then years later, he sort of started to make the connection. Now, something interesting I found out about this Count of Saint Germain guy was that he let it slip that right before he died in 1784, he said that he was actually born this is what he said to somebody. He said to somebody he was actually born in 1690 and was the son of the Prince Rákóczi of Transylvania. Now, to add some fuel to that fire, there's a theosophist writer. His name is C.W. Leadbeater. Sorry, it's just a name that made me laugh. C.W. Leadbeater. And he says...
Also sounds like jacking off.
Kind of, in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he claims that in 1926 in Rome, he meets none other than the Count of Saint Germain, who, amongst many things, including showing him the robes of an ancient Roman emperor, he tells Leadbeater that his home, where he lives, is actually an ancestral castle located in none other than Transylvania. Now, I think everybody kind of knows about Transylvania's association with vampires, right?
Yeah,
but,
of course.
It's just, this is like the perfect conspiracy theory rabbit hole, I think, for a lot of people, because there's so many loose dots that can be connected, right?
Yeah.
Now, are they all actually connected? There's a lot of people who would say no. There's some people who would absolutely say yes, and I think there's plenty of people who would be on the fence, on the middle ground, who are like, I don't know, part of this sounds convincing, part of this sounds made up, part of it sounds rubbish, right? There are multiple modern vampire sightings in New Orleans, right? Now, I had a hard time finding more specific ones about Jack, personally. Although there was also in that CW Mysteries Decoded episode, there was another instance where there was another guy who claimed to have seen the same figure, who, this was like in the early 2000s, he was, 20 years ago now, so he was still a kid. There's like part of the punk subculture, they had what was called train kids, right, which they would hitch rides on freight trains and like ride the freight trains and party together, right? And whenever they stopped in the French Quarter, there would always be this middle-aged looking mysterious guy who would, dress all in black, who would come over and, start hanging around with all these 20-year-old kids, right? And having a fun time with them, telling them all stories about, all things he did all over the world, right? He spoke almost every language. He would always flirt with, like, all the younger girls, right? And this
guy sucks.
Right? And he even would try to take some of them home with him, right?
It's fucking creep.
Yeah. So is it just a creepy pervert who's calling himself Jack, who has been prowling New Orleans for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Or is it, I'm sure if you really were immortal, right, and you've been alive now for 500 years or so, or even longer, eventually this starts to go. Your head starts to lose a bit of sanity, and you start becoming weirder and creepier and more perverted, and next thing you know, you used to be this majestic count in France. Now you're just, this lunatic running around in New Orleans trying to, prey on younger kids for who knows what, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that is just, there's parts of this that make me go, that make me want to believe, right? There's parts of this that make me go,
of course.
This,
of course.
Count Saint Germain, the Count of Saint Germain was an immortal. He was a vampire in New Orleans. He's lived forever. He's around to now. I'm probably going to meet him someday, right?
Yeah,
Right? And then there's other parts of me that's like, come on, really?
I really liked where the story started, and I feel like had it been like more mysterious and like, maybe like he did move away from New Orleans in 1904, and then like he, you mentioned like him popping up in like California, but then it's like just turns out like there's also this other, like there's still a guy like locally in New Orleans like now that's just like creeping on kids, and like if that's him, that seems really lame. Like as a vampire,
bit,
you know what I mean?
A little bit.
Yeah, as opposed to like him like reinventing himself like in California in the 1920s during the gold rush or something.
Yeah,
but
like, here's the thing. Here's the thing is this could just be a separate guy, right? Because at the same time, to this day,
it could all be different people.
To this day, there's still sightings of the Count of Saint Germain, right? By people all over the world, right? Now, it's obviously a big thing in the Theosophy religious movement to claim to have an encounter with them, but there's granted you should take things on the internet with a grain of salt, but there are multiple accounts that you can find on subreddits and things of people who claim to have a run-in with some strange guy who called himself the Count of Saint Germain, and they're like, who the fuck was I talking to if this guy's been dead since 1784, right? So
it's interesting. There are theosophy books in my home.
Oh, is there
in
really?
My house? My wife has read about theosophy. She knows a good amount about theosophy. I'm gonna have to look up this Count of Saint Germain to see how much.
I'd be curious to see what she knows about him, if she's familiar with him in any way. Interestingly, I want to one last anecdote, right? And this sort of has almost nothing to do with it, but also because the Count of Saint Germain is like this famous mysterious guy, he's also a popular stock character that you run into a lot in fiction. And the first time I ever even heard of the Count of Saint Germain was he's a character in one of the Castlevania video games, which to make shit come full circle for those who don't know,
that's awesome.
Castlevania is a video game series about a family of vampire hunters who fight Dracula. And
that's cool.
In the video game he shows up in, the Count of Saint Germain is sort of like this enigmatic, mysterious, enlightened individual who's hinted to be like a time traveler who's like trying to like correct the timeline and guide humanity to avert disaster from Count Dracula destroying the world and stuff like that. And I just think it's so funny that when I was reading this and I was going down this rabbit hole and learning more and more about it, and I was like, wait a minute, I recognize the name Saint Germain. Where have I heard that from? Oh, it's Castlevania. What is Castlevania about? Vampires.
I mean, I feel like I've definitely heard that Count of Saint Germain before. It sounds like you said as a stock character. It sounds like something that's like in a Scooby-Doo episode or something. You know what I mean? Like it's very much like, I think vampires are super interesting. I love like vampire movies. I think that like the lore behind it, I do think it's like very funny. I think some things are the garlic thing is so funny. But I love like the stake in the heart. I love the fact that like, they can't be out in the sun. There's certain like loopholes to the sun and that they live really long. Like vampires are very interesting to me. And like New Orleans is a very culturally interesting place. It has a lot of history to it, even though like in the grand scheme of the world, it's only, 200 plus 300 plus years old, right? You said 1716 or something
it's
like that.
1718, I believe, at
1718,
305
so
years old.
Right. But I mean, it is like steeped in all of these different cultures, which we'll sort of talk about in a bit when we come back to eat a snack. But I think vampires are awesome. I would love to talk about more vampires. Mercy Brown. We talked about that on the Beastie Boys regular episodes in the first season of that. But Yeah, vampires are. I think vampires are cool. I'd love to believe in vampires. I would love to be a vampire myself. Nice and skinny, really pale, wearing black all the time. Those are all qualities I wish other people to think about me when they when they picture Jon Stenning. What do they picture? Vampire qualities. I'm all about that. Yeah, I love that. I love the aesthetic of vampires. I even am a Twilight defender. I don't think Twilight is as bad as everyone thinks. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big vampire fan myself. My favorite novel ever is Dracula, right? I grew up with vampires through, video games like Castlevania and also tons of vampire movies like The Lost Boys. And
hell yeah.
There's just vampires are just such a fun topic.
Yeah.
And it's something that
30 Days of Night. 30 Days
so
of Night
good.
is a great comic book.
So
it's a great
good.
movie, but a great comic book. Yeah. Yeah, really cool. Love vampires. All right. Well, maybe we're going to talk about some flavors that vampires don't like garlic. We can talk about garlic some more. Are you ready? We'll take a quick break.
Yeah,
we'll come back. And
I think this is a good time.
All right, cool. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're going to eat some chips. And we are back on Cryptid Nuggets. Jon Stenning, Mitch DeAngelis. Mitch, we are about to taste test some chips that coincide with the second home of wow, what the fuck was the guy's name? I already forgot.
The Count of Saint Germain.
Wow, the Count of Saint Germain. Boy. Shows you how interesting I thought he was. No, I just I don't know. I kept wanting to call him. I think I might know someone with the last name Saint Germain, so I keep wanting to call him that person's first name. But I'm not about to dox. I'm not about to dox that person.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I keep thinking. The Count of Saint Germain. I'm definitely going to look him up in those Theosophy books. But we are going to eat a chip in just a second. But before we get there, I would like to talk about. We talked about Creole and we talked about Cajun a little bit. We talked about like those cultures, which are sort of an amalgamation of other cultures. And the chips that we're about to have are very much inspired by one a little bit more than the other, but I think are inspired by both. But Cajun and Creole are different, right? A lot of people use them in hand. But like in the culture of New Orleans, Creole is like, and Cajun are a lot of the times referred to in terms of like food that you're going to go out and get, right? Talked about how New Orleans is a great food city. I've had a lot of great food there, and there are different Cajun and Creole restaurants. People maybe you've heard of like jambalaya, or you've heard of,
I love jambalaya. I make a jambalaya at home pretty frequently. It's so delicious.
And now in that jambalaya, is there tomato?
Yeah, no, I do use tomato. Because I know there's a difference. I know there's a tomato version and a non-tomato version.
So generally, Creole cuisine uses tomato.
Oh, okay.
Whereas proper Cajun food does not, right?
Oh.
And so like many markets, like the markets of like this chip brand that we're about to talk about, which is Zapp's chips, they often like they embrace these Cajun heritage or like with a Creole influence, right?
Yeah.
And so like Creole is often referred to like maybe more generalized as like a city food, right? Mm-hmm. And Cajun is a little bit more of like a country, like a backcountry, backwoods type of food, right?
Yeah.
But it is two very distinct cultures. Cajun is a term that originated from a French term to describe a group of French colonists that lived in the Acadia region of Canada. That was Les Acadiens.
Oh,
and so it's kind of like very French, like, and so from the Acadiens came Cajun.
Yeah.
And those are people that were forced out of the Acadia region of Canada and then ended up settling in the swampy region of Louisiana, which is now known as Acadiana. So it sort of was a play on Acadia.
Okay, so it's like a play on words.
Yeah, exactly. Like from the French to like the now basically like bastardized English version of it. Now Cajun food is, I think a lot of people think of it as like spicy, but that doesn't necessarily mean like hot spicy.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think like there is a lot of cayenne pepper used in it, but there's also a medley of vegetables and it's based on like a type of French cuisine that's called mirepoix. My French is terrible, so I don't really know how to say any of these things. That's all right. But it's a lot of like onion, celery, bell pepper. They tend to avoid carrots.
Yeah.
And the
all
aforementioned
sorts of
garlic.
Ingredients I love to cook with.
Yeah, garlic, paprika, which I put paprika on stuff all the time. Thyme, parsley. Those are all common ingredients in a Cajun kitchen. Now, Creole, on the other hand, it's a population of people that were born to the settlers of the colonial Louisiana. So first generation Louisianans, especially. Now, in the 18th century, that was mostly like descendants of like upper class French and Spanish people, people that were like ruling the city in that time.
Yeah.
But then over time, that term like began to include like Louisiana-born slaves of African descent, as well as like free people of color that became free in that area. So basically, this like a little bit more first generation Louisianan, and it sort of started as a little bit more high society thing, but then it became anyone, and it is still a bit of a broad brush. It's a little bit more of a broad brush, I think, than Cajun.
Yeah.
But with the Creole food, it blends various cultures of New Orleans specifically, but plus like the Italian, the Spanish influence, the African, the German, the Caribbean, Native American, Portuguese, like because all of these different. Like there were different neighborhoods, and there still are to this day in New Orleans.
Yeah.
That sort of coincide with all those different cultures. But that is just sort of an amalgamation of the amount of flavors that we're about to have here. Now, recently on the show, we've done a few different chips. The first chips that we did were all dressed.
Yeah.
And to me, this is a Zapp's potato chip. It's a New Orleans kettle-style Voodoo chip. And to me, it's almost a Louisiana all dressed. Now, Mitch, have you ever heard of these chips before?
So much like all dressed, right?
Yeah.
I've heard of them, honestly, first through you when we were discussing our initial idea for this very podcast. And, we were talking about different chips and flavors from around the world and around the country, and you mentioned Voodoo chips, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of those, right?
Yeah.
In a way, I think it's almost fitting to say that it's like the Louisiana version of all dressed, because they're both big French populations that there's that big association. So that's also kind of neat in a connection I didn't make until you said it.
Yeah, so Zapp's originated in 1985. The headquarters are in Gramercy, Louisiana. They are a kettle-cooked chips. All of their flavors are kettle-cooked in peanut oil, except for one flavor that they have, which is like a Bourbon Street smoky sweet flavor, which are like thin and crispy. But these are a kettle-cooked chip, which like if you're from this area, it's like a kettle-cooked or a Cape Cod chip or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so these were super, super regional in my memory until about 10 or so years ago, which makes sense upon looking at the history of this company because they were sold. They were like an independent chip distributor out of Louisiana, but then they were sold to the Utz company when Ron Zapp, the founder of the company, he founded the company in 1985. He died in 2009.
Oh.
And in 2010, or he died in 2010, and in 2011, they were sold to Utz. Yeah, that's right. So he died in 2010, and in January of 2011, Utz bought out the company, and so now they're a little bit less regional, but the flavor I think is still very regional. So we have these little, 1 ounce bags. Did you open yours yet?
No, I didn't open mine. I was waiting for a good opportunity to crack it open and take a whiff, as I like to do.
Yeah. So let me know what you think about the flavor. This is Zapp's most popular flavor of chip, but it wasn't introduced until 2008. What do you think about the smell?
I mean, to me, honestly, it just smells like a regular kettle cooked chip. But I can sort of tell by the color, right? It's got an interesting. I'm gonna pull one out. It's got sort of.
It's a very fun bag too.
Yeah. It's got a. It is a very fun bag. This just like screams to me like New Orleans Mardi Gras. Jazz. We're getting fun. We're getting funky.
Yeah, there's all voodoo dolls all over it. There's like little
exactly.
voodoo dolls with like little like needles in them and stuff. Which, And Mitch is holding up this kettle cooked chip. Do you want to give it a taste? What do you think?
I mean, I would love to give it a taste. I'm excited. I will say that from the color, right, I can tell that it's a little different than like other kettle cooked chips that I've had, because usually kettle cooked is only the ones I've had at least are usually flavored with like salt and pepper, right? So
okay,
I'm
yeah.
interested to
You
know
got
what
any
this
predictions?
tastes like.
Any predictions? Or what does it say on the bag?
I don't know. What does it say? Does it say?
No, it just says New Orleans kettle style, and then unless you like look at the actual ingredients.
Oh yeah. I'm expecting, without spoiling the ingredients for myself, I'm expecting maybe some of those vegetable type flavors that we spoke of earlier.
Okay.
Yep. I'm not expecting any ketchup flavor, right?
Okay.
Because you said previously that this is more Cajun inspired and it doesn't really use a lot of tomato, right?
Yep.
So, as the French would say, bon appetit.
Wow, nice, very nice. Wow, great crunch on the air. Yeah, so they have a bunch of other flavors. Let me go over them real quick before I hear what you think about these flavors. Feel free to have a second one. So they have a lot of fun flavors. Voodoo is fun, right? I think the bag is fun. I know I'm saying that with very little enthusiasm, but I truly do believe that. Like, these are like fun looking chips. The bags are a lot of fun. They have spicy Cajun craw tater, sour cream and Creole onion, Cajun dill gator taters. Now, I have tried most of these. I probably had them when I was down in New Orleans like 10 years ago or so for work. I love to buy chips when I'm in the middle of my big bike rides. So like I seek these things out, and Voodoo chips are like some of my favorite chips. They're up there with like all dressed chips. They also have a hotter and hot jalapeno and a mesquite barbecue. But like I said, this is their most popular flavor. What do you think upon your first try?
I like it. I gotta be damn honest with you. I like it way better than the all dressed ones. I mean, I didn't hate the all dressed, but this is almost like all dressed but better. And I'm getting some sour cream and onion kind of vibes. I'm getting definitely some salt and vinegar, right? I'm getting that sort of like southern barbecue kind of taste to it.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. Interesting. Yep.
There's definitely some other herbs and spices in there. It tastes maybe a little garlicky.
Yep.
And I mentioned some onion before.
Yep.
I just love it. This is really good.
Yeah, I definitely think it's reminiscent of an all-dressed chip. I would say I do like it more than an all-dressed. I would agree with you there. According to their copy, it is a blend of sweet, spicy, and uniquely Cajun flair with just the right hint of smoky barbecue sweetness. So that means salt and vinegar with a smoky barbecue that brings sweetness and a spicy jalapeno kick. But like you said, there's also like paprika and onion flavoring in here and garlic flavoring and all that good stuff. These are an absolute banger of a chip, I think. This is an S tier chip for me. It's one of the best chips I've ever had. A Zapp's Voodoo chip is one of the best Voodoo.
Already one of my favorites.
Yeah. So I
would gladly go to New Orleans.
You can kind of find them.
Have a big bag of this.
Yeah, and you can find them a little bit easier, but I would agree. I would, just like for the thrill of being there and having these like chips in New Orleans, without a doubt, I'd be looking up friggin' the Count of Saint Germain. Wow, I got it that time. Yeah. And I would be looking him up, and I'd be sitting on his front step, hoping that the nuns would come and bless me as I ate my voodoo chips. Yeah. I think they're super good, and I think their other flavors are really good too. I really like the Cajun dill, the Cajun dill gator taters. They're like dill, but with a little bit of like this like other spice on it too. They're just like kind of like this chip, but a little bit more like pickle forward, which I think is like really nice. And I absolutely love Zapp's. They are no longer like they're manufactured with Utz out of like Pennsylvania, so they're no longer super regional, which I think sometimes can take away from it, but they seem to have scaled appropriately, and I think these chips are just as good as they were, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever.
I definitely would be interested in trying some of those other flavors, too, and, there's a lot, I hinted earlier that there's a lot of other paranormal stuff that's sort of Louisiana, New Orleans based, so maybe down the line, we might have to return to this general region and try another Zapp's flavored chip, one of their flavors, or just even another brand that does a similar thing.
Yeah, let's just do brand. Yeah, we'll do a grab bag or something of different Zapp's flavors, because I think Zapp's is a great chip brand. Yeah, and they are, like I said, people are seeing them more and more all across the states, I think, but they're not like Lay's. You don't see them everywhere. So yeah. So what do you think? I think we sort of mentioned it earlier, but on our way of would you pay the import tax for these? Would you just pay for a plane to fly to New Orleans, or you're not even going to consider picking these up again? What do you think?
I think, honestly, I would go to New Orleans to get some of these. I mean,
yeah, hell yeah.
You know, especially like
let's go hand in hand.
Yeah, as we've discussed, I'm not the most well-traveled person, right?
Yeah.
But if I ever do have the opportunity to go to New Orleans, which I would love to, just to see, you know, all the famous places and, you know, try all the local cuisine, right? I'm not even a Mardi Gras guy, so I'm not really going to go there to party, but, like, I'll be looking for these if I ever go. You know what I mean?
And I'm telling you, dude, great food. Like, great, like, I went to this one place, and it was, like, August. It was hot as hell. It was, like, one of the most humid days I've ever witnessed, and, like, all the windows open, fans blasting, and I still got, like a hot jambalaya, and it was, like, one of the best meals of my life. You know?
My goodness, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's a great city. So I have an idea. Let's go to the vampire grave here in Rhode Island, Mercy Brown's grave. Let's dig her up. Let's have her bite us. So we can both turn into vampires, which means then we can turn into bats, fly down to New Orleans ourselves so that we don't have to pay the airlines, and then eat a bunch of voodoo chips and meet the Count of Saint Germain.
I'm all for it. That sounds like quite the adventure.
Right. That sounds great. That's how we'll have to kick off season 2 or 3 of the podcast. With us exhuming the grave of Mercy Brown. So because she, in fact, was definitely a vampire. We all know that for a fact.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, she definitely was. But, yeah, I absolutely love these chips, and I would be happy to talk about New Orleans more because it is, like, steeped in history and flavors, and so I think it's, like, the perfect... You know, maybe not the next episode, but down the line a little bit to revisit these.
It's one of those perfect things that you can always return to because there's going to be something new to talk about that we haven't talked about before.
Right.
Just like how something like Bigfoot is such a wide subject that you can always go back to and talk about some new aspect of it, right? Same thing with, I think, New Orleans, not only with the paranormal side, but also the amazing cultural side of it.
Yeah, hell yeah, yeah. Well... we bought like a grab bag of these, right? I bought like 10 of them, and we both got 5. I don't know how long these are gonna last.
I mean, I'm
probably because it's a small bag
tonight for sure, right?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna. I have to at least have one more bag after this, if not 2.
I mean, I'm about to eat dinner soon, so I don't want to spoil my dinner.
Same,
but
same.
I don't foresee these bags making it till the end of the week.
No. Oh, no. The end of the week? No way, dude. It's the beginning of the week. There's no way in hell.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to make them 3 more days, to be honest. But, yeah. These are really great. Great, interesting story. Thanks for sharing, and hope you enjoyed the chips. I'm glad you enjoyed the chips.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to have enjoyed them.
Hell yeah. All right. So, yeah, that was great. And for the Beastie Boys...
Yeah.
See you on the next one. Spook you on the next one. Steak you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Make sure you eat your garlic to ward off the vampires. Bye, everybody. Eat your garlic. Yeah, eat your garlic and carry garlic around your... Remember that? I know we were trying to end, but you know how people like wear garlic necklaces all the time? That's really cool to keep vampires away.
Yeah.
Garlic necklace. Just eat a little bit of garlic. If you've eaten garlic, would that ward off a vampire?
I don't know, man. I don't know because like... It's really iffy because there's some vampire stuff where garlic works and then there's other stuff where it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. Yeah, right. I don't. They're all real. So all these things are real. Just different types of vampires.
All I think of when it comes to the garlic necklace is there's that scene in The Lost Boys where the little brother wearing a garlic necklace.
Love it.
And his mom's like, "Have you been eating pizza?" And he's like, "No, why?" Because you reek like garlic. And it shows he's got the big garlic necklace around his neck.
It is a very smelly food. Famously, it makes you smelly when you eat it. So I think if you ate enough, you could ward off the Count of Saint Germain and any other New Orleans vampire.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Eat your garlic. Garlic a day keeps the vampire away. Okay, bye, Mitch.
Bye, John.
Decaf left, regular right. Decaf left, regular right. Very challenging work.